Trump's tariffs are illegal.
Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's great.
Katangi
Africa's
Brown
great.
Jackson
Africa's great.
led the charge
Africa's
to
great.
strike down
Africa's
Trump's
great.
illegal
Africa's great.
tariffs.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Chief Justice
Africa's great.
John
Africa's
Roberts.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's
Justice
great. Africa's
Amy
great.
Corey Barrett.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
great.
John Gorsuch.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Sonia
great.
Sotomayor.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Elena
great.
Kagan.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Trump is defeated. Is defeated. Is defeated. Trump's tariffs are illegal.
Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's great.
Katanji
Africa's
Brown
great.
Jackson
Africa's great.
led the charge
Africa's
to
great.
strike down
Africa's
Trump's
great.
illegal
Africa's great.
tariffs.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Chief Justice
Africa's great.
John
Africa's
Roberts.
great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's
Justice
great. Africa's
Amy
great.
Corey Barrett.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
great.
John Gorsuch.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Sonia
great.
Sotomayor.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Elena
great.
Kagan.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Trump is defeated. Is defeated. Is defeated. Trump's tariffs are illegal.
Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's great.
Katanji
Africa's
Brown
great.
Jackson
Africa's great.
led the charge
Africa's
to
great.
strike down
Africa's
Trump's
great.
illegal
Africa's great.
tariffs.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Chief Justice
Africa's great.
John
Africa's
Roberts.
great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's
Justice
great. Africa's
Amy
great.
Corey Barrett.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
great.
John Gorsuch.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Sonia
great.
Sotomayor.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Elena
great.
Kagan.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Trump is defeated. Is defeated. Is defeated.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. It's the motivator here. This is where we translate our words into action and where success is most certainly ours for taking. Hey? It's a mindset. Yeah. It's a success mindset. It's the mindset that says we are undefeated. Yeah. We are undefeated. Because this is where you'll be informed. This is where you'll be enhanced. This is where you'll find courage, determination, forthrightness. This is where you come alive. Hey, come of age. In some cases, come of age. Oh yeah. We have lined up for you a fantastic podcast. Yes, change the theme for today's podcast, which the theme that we had planned will be viewed in a couple podcasts hence. But don't you worry, we decided today to ensure that we bring to you a topic that is resonating with you today, and that is these illegal tariffs that have been devastating the world order, has been ruled by the US Supreme Court as being illegal. 80+% of them have been struck down, is the term used by the Supreme Court. It's now time for us to review what that means for us. In approximately 30 minutes' time, we'll have a keynote speaker on the subject. It will be truly infuriating. It will be fantastic and an experience that you will not forget. Truly informative, encouraging, inspirational. Truly inspirational. But between now and then, as you know, I've got a lot to pack in. Because this is fundamentally a campaigning channel of issues of social concern, issues that we must not forget, issues we must keep in our line of sight, so that those who will benefit from our generosity, those who will benefit from our empathy, can indeed benefit. So without further ado, let's go straight into it. I want to just acknowledge at least one of my past contributors, and I want to acknowledge Dr. Carlton Brown. You recall, we had him here on the Motivator Show discussing the economic viability, the economic vibrancy that is very much contained in the African communities, both the Caribbean and the continental communities here in Britain. If those of you in the US and other places it's unusual to hear such words, I realize that. That's why we bring it to you live and direct. He's devoted his life to supporting the upbringing of those entrepreneurs from this community with a clear mandate from the community that we want greater economic sovereignty. Mhm. The only way to achieve that, of course, is to ensure that those who are able, those who have the drive, those who have the gall, the guts, as it were, determination, are given appropriate support. We want to give our thumbs up and recognize Dr. Carlton Brown. Long may your work continue, Dr. Carlton Brown. And we want to ensure that your Black Entrepreneurs Conference, which is due in June of this year, is well attended. And later on in this podcast, details of how you can attend that conference will be available on screen. It is an important step forward. Well done, Dr. Carlton Brown. I also want to, of course, give recognition to a series of campaigns that we here at the Motivator Show have decided are important. Mhm. There are other important campaigns, don't misunderstand us, but we've just taken a handful that we want to give light to. One of those campaigns has to do with FGM. It's a subject you may not heard much about, but it's prevalent within the communities. Mhm. FGM stands for female genital mutilation, of which there are far too many women, far too many women who have been brutalized, far too many women who are living with the consequences of FGM, female genital mutilation. I've come across some of those women, and I'm astonished, absolutely astonished, that the men in those communities would have allowed those women to be mutilated in that manner. I think it's wholly, wholly unacceptable. I very much want to speak to the men in those communities where FGM is still prevalent, illegally prevalent. Because in many of the countries, it is actually legally. Mhm. I'd love to speak to the men. I've spoken to many of the women, and they speak to me because I'm outside of that sort of cultural practice. But their first-hand accounts, I want to assure you, is heart-wrenching. So we here at the Motivator Show want to keep this particular subject alive and in the forefront of our minds. That wherever we can discuss, debate, and preferably eradicate this practice, we should do so. It is not our intention to shame or embarrass those who practice this, okay? But I do respectfully ask, you ask the women without social pressure placed upon them, to ask them the question, if you had the choice, would you have an intimate part of your body removed? Hmm? I know most men, 99.999%, would not have it, any part of their bodies removed. Mhm. So we want to give women the choice. It should not happen when they're babies. It should not happen when they are unable to say yay or nay because they are too young. When they're old enough to decide that they want to do it for themselves, that's a different matter. But to take that right away from them when they are children, girls, is wholly unacceptable. Here in London, we have a remarkable human being. She's an elected official here in London. Okay. And she is an FGM ambassador. Okay. She is indeed a remarkable human being. Her name is Councillor Naima Ali. I'll put the details on the screen. There you are. She's the founder, and indeed a former mayor of Southwark, but the founder of Unshackled Duma. Unshackled Duma is a London-based organization that empowers women and girls, particularly from Black, Asian, world majority and Muslim communities. The organization focuses on promoting self-empowerment, autonomy, advocacy, and a strong emphasis on combating female genital mutilation, FGM. It raises awareness about FGM's harmful effects and supports survivors and works towards eradicating the practice. If you wish to reach out to her, if you wish to speak to her, send a message to her via this email address, unshackledduma followed by digit 2 at gmail.com. I repeat, unshackledduma followed by a digit 2 at gmail.com. She would welcome your interaction. She'd welcome hearing from you. Okay. Well done, Councillor Naima Ali, an FGM survivor. Well done, well done, well done. And I have to tell you, some of the first-hand accounts I've witnessed, I've been exposed to, are truly heart-wrenching. But these are women that cannot express themselves amongst their own families, their own communities, within their own networks. Let's move on. But it's said it's heart-wrenching. Another subject here on the Motivator Show that we have championed and continue to champion and will not forget. Here in the West, so-called, in Europe, the Americas, Japan, amongst the countries that were part of the so-called Industrial Revolution. Integral to the Industrial Revolution is the use of oil and coal. Over the past, 100, 200 years, not thousands, not millions, but tens of billions of tons of atmospheric warming gases have been released into the atmosphere. With a consequence, we are now experiencing global warming, despite the fact we should be going through a mini ice age, according to the data. We're actually going through a period of rapid global warming. And we're all experiencing it. Here in London, I believe may have 1 day or so of very light snow. The rest have been mild spring-like weather. 30 years ago, we'd have had 6 to 8 inches of snow on the ground. But yet 30 years hence, it's spring-like weather. That's a red flag. That's a clear red flag. And if you're not clear about that, that is a clear red flag. A clear red flag. I want you here all to hear it. It's a clear red flag. Listen to this boom. Boom of danger. Boom of danger. Boom of danger. Boom of danger. There's no pleasure in those sounds. That's danger. 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 30 years hence. Look, the water, the sea are riding. It will continue to rise to dangerous levels, but rapidly at a rate that cities cannot cope with. 30 years hence, the difference will be truly noticeable. So we need to pay attention to this. But I am conscious that there are islands in the Caribbean which are now experiencing unusual weather patterns. Caribbeans are now experiencing dangerous hurricanes. When we say dangerous hurricanes, what we mean are hurricanes of, more recently, 185 miles an hour, Category 5 hurricanes, right at the beginning of the hurricane season. Hurricane Melissa, the most recent, truly dangerous hurricane to hit the Caribbean, and specifically Jamaica and Cuba, Haiti. Devastated the islands. There are people now living from hand to mouth. Whole villages totally wiped out, in livelihood destroyed, homes destroyed, public buildings destroyed. Still today, Jamaica is now on the path to build back better, but that will take time. Jamaica, of course, will be devastated if every year we have a category 5 hurricane. 185 miles an hour. If we had 185 miles an hour here in London, London will be threatened. Can you imagine 185 miles an hour in London or Washington or Paris? Yeah, indeed. In Beijing, it will be devastated. In Moscow, it will be devastated. Yeah, absolutely. Jamaica remains devastated. It's building back better right now. But if there's yet another hurricane, It'll be 3 serious hurricanes in 3 years. In the previous year, we had Hurricane Beryl. I say all this as a further capital warning. Let me just do this again. It's a warning. Those are not pleasure warnings. Yeah. I need you to hear it. I need you to hear it. I need you to hear it. That's the warning. That's the warning. We'll play this in every episode. It's a warning. We must do better as a species, as a race of peoples. We must do better. We must adopt sustainable energy sources, sun, solar energy, in other words, wind, wave, yep, alternative energy sources, other than using fossil fuels, coal and oil. No matter what this mad president says in the US, we all know he's wrong. Yes, he is. Yes, he is naked. Tell him he's naked. Yeah. There's an organization here in Britain by the name of PNP UK, which has devoted itself to supporting the people of Jamaica. Mhm. They're doing it in stages, looking at public buildings. One such public building is a school for minors, for the little ones, for the most vulnerable members of our communities. Yeah. I want you to listen to the principal of a school that was devastated by Hurricane Melissa. 185 miles an hour, category 5 hurricane. Listen to what she says. Listen to her most sincere appeal to the international community for support to build back her school. Okay? They're struggling. They're desperate for our help. And if this word of this principle doesn't move you, then I think you must be dead inside. I want you to listen to her. She's a professional teaching minors. Yeah, the most vulnerable members of our community. Listen to what she has to say.
PNP UK Hurricane Melissa Disaster Relief Fund appeal for a better Jamaica.
Good morning, students.
Say good morning, parents.
Good morning, students.
Today is Which month are we in?
We are in the month of January.
Everyone, I am Lexia Lewis Hines, principal of the New Building Early Childhood Institution in New Building, Nain, St. Elizabeth. We were adversely affected by the passing of Hurricane Melissa on October 28, 2025. And as such, we lost our school roof, we have lost furniture, books, and other learning materials for our young ones. I am hereby making a plea asking for any contribution that can be given to assist us in further renovating our school building so that our students can return to some semblance of normalcy. We have already received some donations and we're able to cover half the roof. The other half is patched up with the old zinc that was there from before. And as such, any contribution is an investment in our young ones, the future generation. And so this is my plea, asking for any contribution that can be given in assisting us to be better able to facilitate our young students. Thank you so very much.
New Building Early Childhood School, New Buildings District, Nain, St. Elizabeth, Jamaica. On behalf of PNP UK, we hope you would agree that this school needs to be rebuilt so that the children can enjoy the teaching and learning experience. Support the Hurricane Melissa Disaster Relief Fund to build back better the school. Send your donation, whatever you can afford, to PNP UK, That's at NatWest Bank, sort code 600802, account number 2986123, and in the bank reference, please quote DRF Melissa. Thank you for considering. Thank you for your donations.
PNP, you
I think you would agree that he is truly a worthy cause. Truly a worthy cause. And we will continue to monitor the activities of PNP UK in Jamaica in building back that school. We hope to have a further report from them of progress made to date. But we will monitor, and every penny that, or penny or cent, whatever currency you're using, I know, every currency you're using, it will be accounted for. It's not like giving to one of these charities, which then skim off a 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% for administrative charges. Here, 100% of what you give will be devoted to building back that school. 100%. That's the difference. That's why we're not using these other methodologies. Directly into their account, you put in the reference DRF Melissa, it's clear what's intended, and that money absolutely will be used for that purpose. That's why the Motivator Show gives promotion to this campaign. If you can, please do so. If you didn't catch the details, this is clearly recorded here on YouTube. Just rewind. You have the details before you. It is a worthy cause. I want to thank all those members of PNP UK who are involved in this campaign, who've devoted much of their spare time to this, understanding the importance of how civilizations are judged. It is not judged by how much money, how much wealth is garnered by the elite, those who are most able, but by our ability as a community to support those in greatest need, those who are most vulnerable, those who are weakest, those who are sickest. That's how we're judged. Our moral compass must be clear and firm. This is not biblical speaking, this is common sense speaking. This is our species speaking, supporting those in greatest need, because together we will all be enhanced. In unity is strength. And thank you for your support. Thank you for your support. I'll now move on to another one of our important issues to be tackled here on the Motivator Show. It's all about you. Yes, you. Yes, you. Yes, I can see you. Yes, you. We're concerned about lifestyle. Mhm. In approximately 10 minutes, we'll be looking at what's happening in the United States of America and those tariffs. But before then, we want to address the issue of lifestyle, how our lifestyle affects our health. Mhm. We're very concerned that the levels of diabetes, high blood pressure or hypertension, obesity or fatness, cancers, respiratory conditions that are impacting communities are growing for no good reason other than our lifestyle. What we eat, what we do or not doing. One of the aspects of what we're not doing is exercising enough, keeping our bodies in shape. Mhm. It has consequences for our health and well being. It is vital not only do we keep our body in shape, that we eat foods that are appropriate for us. Reduce the E numbers, we say. I'll let the food industry complain later on. Reduce the E numbers. Read the packages. Reduce the E numbers. They're invariably colors or preservatives. Eaten over a sustained period of time, a long period of time, in other words. They don't know the impact it has on your body, but what is clear that there are hormone disrupting chemicals in many of our foods that are most certainly causing us all to become ill. Here on the Motivator Show, we wish to spend just a handful of minutes, less than a handful of minutes, to encourage you to exercise. Yeah, exercise. But before we get to the exercise, we want you to listen to the words of a professor, the public health director here in London, a person of immense compassion, who's devoted his life to our health and well-being. We want you to hear his word. Don't listen to me. Hear his word, his advice, common sense advice as to how we can maintain good health and well-being. And if in doubt, we encourage you to ask questions. I say again, if in doubt, we encourage you to ask questions. Because we want you to choose a healthy lifestyle. Listen to the professor.
Professor Kevin Fenton says, I'm a public health director. Here are 5 things you can do to improve your health. 1. Mindful and balanced eating. Nourish wisely. Eat whole, balanced meals with awareness to support energy and well-being. 2. Get outside. Be with nature. Time outside reduces stress, improves mood, and strengthens your connection to the world. 3. Stay curious, stay engaged, explore new interests, keep your mind sharp, build social contacts, and boost your happiness. 4. Get active, move it or lose it. Move daily, lift weight, and do cardio. Exercise, improve physical, mental, mood, and energy. 5. Prioritize rest and sleep. Disconnect, rest. Quality sleep supports mental clarity, emotional balance, and overall health.
There you are. Those are the basic, very straightforward messages. It's common sense, really, isn't it? But we need to hear it again and again, day in and day out, to remind ourselves what we need to do to take responsibility. Reparations begins with self, taking conscious decisions, constant steps to repair, to rebuild, to build back better, as it were. Okay. So his words resonate and have been resonating with hundreds and thousands of our listeners over time. And we have clear evidence. We've saved lives, transformed lives, made lives healthier, more vigorous, more rewarding. And in doing so, we create the wave. You are the change, not us. You are the change makers. It's your decision. You've decided reparations begin with self, taking responsibility for what happens to you. And indeed, you influence your partners, your wife, your husband, your brothers, your sisters, your nieces, your nephews. And in doing so, you influence your friends and your wider network. That's the wave, influence, a positive wave of reconstruction, building back better, maintaining good health and well-being. And what we're heartened by, the number of you heard these messages, understood their importance, and incorporated them as part of your life, and ensuring that you build back better. You are determined to live a better, healthier life, more positive life, a physically more vigorous life. What I'm heartened by, what we are heartened by, the number of you who've heard these messages and have responded, have come together in common aim and common purpose, understood the importance of these messages, and understood it's for you. You are the beneficiary. You are the change makers. King Kabbalah of the African Continental Unity Party would say, you are the change makers. You are taking responsibility for the changes that occurred in your immediate life, your family's life, indeed your community's life, by your conscious decision. I want to play you an example of people who've come together in common aim and common purpose, who are now exercised together in happiness and vigorously. Absolutely wonderful people who've come together in common aim and common purpose. understanding. If you work together, you can transform the world together. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. So watch this short video. It's only 2 minutes. People come together and are now exercising together, and their children are present too. To inculcate in the minds of the children, regular exercise is a must. Good habits they take into their adulthood. Watch this. Not expecting you to just sit there. Come on now. It's only 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. Let's exercise together. You can sit on your chair if you really wish. Or if you can get up, yes, there you are. Bend your knees. That's right. That's right. There you go. There you go. Bend your knees. That's it. Makes all the difference. You see, they're big and they're small. They're wide and they're thin. They're young and they're old. In fact, they are. Come together. Come on, we're more than likely to survive. Stretch your arm. Stretch your arm. That's our little. What are these? Look at that. There you are. Oh yes. Oh yes. This is what we need more. There you go. That's right. See that children there? Watch your mum and dad exercise together. That's right. Ooh. Look at that. Lovely stretching. Oh, yes. There you go. Huh? Look at that. Huh? Oh, she's smiling at us. She's smiling. They're all smiling at us. There you are. Ooh. There you are. You see that? No, they're working. They sweat. Have you exercised today? Stretch your leg if you haven't. Come on. 2 minutes here on the good. We're concerned about your health and well-being. You see them? Exercise. If their children are there, watching mum and dad exercise. That's the example we need to set for our children. There you are. Ooh, look at my knees. Oh, yes, I can feel it. That's right. There you go. All right, I'm going to pause there. Oh, yes, I can see my sweat. Have you exercised today? Why not? Yeah, why not do so? Yep. And therefore, you give meaning. You actualize the philosophy of the Motivators Show. Because this is where we translate our words into action, and where success is ours for the taking. It's a conscious decision you have made, we have made. Success is ours for the taking. Remain focused, and if you're unsure, hold the hand of someone who you feel confident with, and that person's energy will come into you, and you feel further encouraged. That's why civilizations are great. You can be an individual and run fast by yourself. But if you want to go far, and continue on a path for time and time again, we do this together because we encourage each other. And that encouragement is worth far more than working as an individual and I have no idea what you do. Yeah, that is not the way forward. Working together in unity is strength. You got it? Well said. Well said. Well said. We're rapidly, yeah, you are. We're rapidly approaching that time for the interview, keynote speaker interview, in which we're going to look very closely at the Trump tariffs, would have been struck down by the United States Supreme Court. Okay, struck down. I mean, struck down. Mhm. We need to watch this. We need to watch this. And those of you who are here for the previous subject, it will arise in the very near future. But we felt that this particular subject, based upon the feedback we'd received, is one that we should pursue and feature in this episode of The Motivator Show. The Trump tariffs struck down by United States Supreme Court. But between now and then, we just want to make one further announcement. Again, this is the Motivator Show, so you would expect this. Okay. Often, as we speak on the many subjects we have discussed here at the Motivator Show, there's always a sense that, oh, here we go again. Mhm. And I get that, and I know some people here feel totally, disempowered. Mhm. Feeling of powerlessness. How can we, the individual, make a difference? I have to tell you, because nothing could be no further from the truth. I want you to consider this, particularly United States, here in Britain, but certainly Jamaica and other places. Those countries are ruled by a handful of people. Yeah, they are. United States is in the hands of the corporations, which is why the 47th president is seeking to abolish regulations so companies can poison you without any repercussions. EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States is systematically being dismantled. Yeah. This small elite was totally self-absorbed behind, of course, the abolition of the Federal Education Department. Can you imagine abolishing the Federal Education Department? Mhm. Wow. In the richest country in the world that seeks economic supremacy across the world, gosh, but only want to educate a small proportion of its population. How myopic, how short sighted can you be? Wow. Project 25, huh? We say all this here on the Motivator Show to remind you that this is fact. If you're in doubt of what we've just described, please do your own research. Do your own research if in doubt. We've completed the research, otherwise, we would not utter these words. As we've described to quite a number of potential contributors to the Motivator Show, unless we're able to verify the evidence, statements you're going to make, you will not appear here. We only have guests who are providing information that is substantiated, that is truthful, unfiltered, that is raw and direct. So the integrity of this channel is maintained. What has happened in the United States is indeed, hopefully, the checks and balances network working. We will see. We will see. The very idea that you would elect 47 presidents who is actually a felon. He is a felon. Administratively, a convicted rapist. Bankrupt 6 times. Yeah. And most probably involved in unsavory pedophile rings. Time will tell. And that's just the beginning of his many deficits. But he was still elected. He was preparing, of course, if he had lost the election, to declare them illegitimate, that they were false, as it was, if he had lost. As he won, he kept quiet. Yeah. If that's an incorrect statement, I encourage you all to do your own research. But the interview that follows will be eye-opening. Could we get to the nub of the subject, to the kernel, as it were? But before I play the interview, I'm going to play the first minute or so of the intro video to this podcast, which was set to scene for the main interview, which will now arrive in less than a handful of minutes. But I want you to watch the intro video. The intro video sets the scene. If in doubt, ask question. I say again, if in doubt, ask question. So let's watch the first minute or so of the intro video, then we move to the main interview.
Trump's tariffs are illegal.
Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's great.
Katanji
Africa's
Brown
great.
Jackson
Africa's great.
led the charge
Africa's
to
great.
strike down
Africa's
Trump's
great.
illegal
Africa's great.
tariffs.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Chief Justice
Africa's great.
John
Africa's
Roberts.
great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's
Justice
great. Africa's
Amy
great.
Corey Barrett.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
great.
John Gorsuch.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Sonia
great.
Sotomayor.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Elena
great.
Kagan.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Trump is defeated. Is defeated. Is defeated.
So now you've seen it. That was the intro. And now you have the names of the justices of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, who struck down more than 80% of the illegal tariffs. They were illegal, struck down. So those countries, particularly little countries with economies worth only a few million, a few hundred million, who were also tariffed by the United States, worth tens of trillions. Yeah. He put tariffs on them. Can you imagine? Gosh. Absurd, huh? Absurd. Struck down, and justifiably so. Now it's time for you to watch the keynote interview. And this interview, I am assuring you, is a truly inspirational experience. It's the motivator here. This is where we translate our words into action, and where success is ours for the taking. And that you got to believe, people, for this is yet another inspirational podcast in which we've got another inspired African man from the US, no doubt. A country which has gained notoriety. Yeah, the 47 presidents has been on our mind. Okay, are there checks and balances in the United States? That's what we're going to discuss today. But without further ado, I'm going to invite my guest, who is an inspired African man from the USA. Yep, I often say United States, forgive me, of America, forgive me for saying that. Here we go. I'm going to ask him to introduce himself, just say his name, organization, and a little bit about himself, just so you get to know him. Sir, please introduce yourself.
Yes, well, good afternoon, good evening, depending where we are at this particular time. My name is Basir M. Chawi. I'm a longtime revolutionary Pan-Africanist. I've been involved in a number of important organizations and struggles over the entirety of my life, actually coming into the struggle as a teenager and then later being a student organizer and then getting involved on a very grassroots level in many of the important struggles of the then 20th century. We're now in the 21st century, and I'm still upright and still struggling. Currently, in terms of organizations, I have a radio program on radio station WBAI in New York. That's at WBAI.org for those of you who would want to actually go ahead and look at it. It's called Education at the Crossroads. I've been doing this particular program for 30 years. We're in the 30th year right now. And this will actually be the last year of me doing this particular program. I have many other projects that I have to really pursue. And being that I am at this particular point an elder statesman, I have to go ahead and consider what I have to do with the time that I have remaining to continue in the struggle of African people.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you. I noticed that you're born in the United States, were you? Were you born in the United States?
I was born in the United States. I was actually born in the Bronx, New York, the borough of the Bronx in New York.
Yes, okay. But you have a distinctly African name, which I've looked it up. It has interesting meanings. My audience is very much a diasporan audience, 250 million or so of us out there, of African descent. This is a path that many are taking to reclaim their name. What does your name mean? Tell us what your name is.
Well, first name Basir, which is actually from Arabic. It means seer. It actually means seer. Basir means seer. Mchawi is from Kiswahili, from the Kiswahili language. And that actually is essentially a community magician, someone who goes ahead and does magic.
And I find that fascinating. Why would you, if I may ask that rather impertinent question, why choose that name, that combination of names?
Well, it's not a matter of always choosing the name. Sometimes the names choose you. And in this particular instance, based upon some of the things that I've been involved in and been able to do, those two names actually were kind of chosen for me.
Oh, right. When you say that, you mean circumstances or a person chosen for you?
Kind of a combination of both, persons and circumstance.
I'm going to accept that. Don't you worry. It's an important path. Reparations begins with self, reclaiming that has been lost. Okay, so it's an important step forward. We all need to take that step. And it's.
Let me just, if I may, let me just really pick up on something very quickly. You mentioned reparations. And 2 weeks ago on my show, I had Professor Ashley Farmer, who is the author of a new biography of Queen Mother Moore. Queen Mother Moore is actually the grandmother of the reparations movement. She is probably the first person that I ever heard speak about reparations. And so since you spoke about reparations, I think it's important to raise the name of Queen Mother Moore. Audley Moore, she was born in 1898, and she was part of just about every major struggle in the 20th century. She lived into her 90s and remained active into her 90s. And finally, someone has done a biography of Queen Mother Moore. So when you talk about reparations, I have to mention Queen Mother Audley Moore.
Appreciate it. And you are right. She is a significant figure. And we need to recognize, particularly women in the reparations movement, their enormous contribution, selfless contribution to the reparations movement. Agreed. And I look forward to maybe speaking to the author of that book. That will prove to be yet another inspirational podcast. Thank you. Thank you for that reference.
And the book is very interesting because she tells a story. It's not a dry biography. It is a narrative, and it is very good. Everyone who reads it enjoys it, and the reviews in North America have been good so far.
Thank you. So we will definitely invite the author to speak to us. And thank you. That's a good direction. And you really set the tone for our dialogue.
Mhm.
I have to say that your country folk elected elected a person who is a known felon. Yeah, a known felon. Someone who clearly, long before he became president, this time or the first occasion, okay, as we could consider to have sort of racist or indeed extreme right-wing tendencies. Mhm. Someone who's been bankrupt, what? Not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times, not 5, 6 times, the biblical 6 times. Yeah. Someone who's a known philanderer. Uh-huh.
And someone who's been found civilly responsible for rape.
Absolutely. But yet, your country folk elected him.
Mhm. Well, let me first just say one thing, and I take the position that Brother Malcolm X took. When people question him about the government and they say, your government, he said, no, it's not my government, it's the government. And I make that same distinction. I take no responsibility for the government of the United States. It is the government, not my government. I do, of course, have to carry a United States passport, but that's just a matter of chance at this particular point. And I suppose if in the remaining years that I have, if I go ahead and get citizenship somewhere else, I'll carry that passport.
I'm going to let that one go for now. Okay. But I might have pursued you, but I'm just conscious of your time and the theme for today's podcast, which is the 47th President and the Supreme Court decision to overturn 80% or more of the tariff. But before I get to the substance, I just want to just get to this particular president. He was also, of course, the 45th president of the United States. In other words, you had a break and you still re-elected him. Okay. What I note, if the more recent election, is that you have at least an African American woman, okay, for the very first time, who could potentially have been elected by yourselves. Forgive me for saying yourselves, but you're it.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all right.
You're it. Huh? You're it. Huh?
I voted in the election. I mean, it's
Okay.
it's right.
And this is, of course, one of the mechanisms used by this particular president is the divide and rule. Okay. So I want to explore just for a few minutes how did he became elected? Okay, with all the
Well,
negatives he had going for him. Oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
I mean,
Yes.
first of all, number one, I have to really hold the Democratic Party responsible for their own demise. And I have to do so in a number of different ways. Let's talk first about the campaign of Kamala Harris. All right.
Indeed.
Kamala Harris was going around with Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney's daughter, attempting to
Yes.
try to get, I guess, Republicans, disgruntled Republicans, to vote for her. In the meantime, the base of the Democratic Party at this particular point, most strongly, is people of African ancestry. She did not go to that particular community, to the base. And in not going to the base, I think that she made a serious error. Part of the
Mhm.
problem is that these campaigns are run by election consultants. Most of
Yes.
those election consultants are white. They have
Mm.
no idea of what the Black community is about, how to go ahead and get Black people to vote in the kinds of numbers that they need to
Mhm.
organize, to do voter registration. None of that stuff
Mhm.
happens. And when it doesn't happen, it's a serious problem. One of the other issues is the question of Palestine. If you recall, at the Democratic National Convention, that speakers included the families of folks who were Israeli prisoners of war. And I'm calling them prisoners of war. I'm not calling them hostages, because the situation in Palestine has been, for years, it has been a constant conflict that has essentially been the fault of the Israelis from the very beginning, going back to 1948. There was, as many people know, a congressperson who is a Palestinian American. She was not given the opportunity to speak at the convention. Yet and still, these Israeli families were. This led to a serious problem in many Muslim and Arab communities, folks who are citizens of the United States, but when they saw the way that they were treated, they chose either not to vote. In one instance, which I thought was a tactical error, there was a major Islamic organization in the Midwest that went ahead and actually supported and endorsed Donald Trump because of what the Democrats did. So we've got this particular problem. And still, while Trump and the Republicans go ahead, one of the latest racist things that Trump did, as many people know internationally, is posting a video in which President Obama and his wife were actually, their heads were transposed onto monkeys. All right.
But
And as
forgive me for interrupting, Basir, but that's what I'm referring to. I'm getting up to that, because clearly his tendencies are known by the electorate, but yet he was still elected, notwithstanding the Democratic Party's foreshowing. He was still elected. I'm leading up to it, understanding how it was possible. I started off by identifying the enormous deficits he started with, but yet he was still able to overcome those deficits. I want to ask about African American men. Okay. Yep. You mentioned, of course, the Palestinian population there. You hinted at Latino population. What about African American men? Was there a problem with African American men supporting Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee?
The numbers, the last numbers that I've seen, is despite the fact that there were a few percentage points in terms of so-called African American men voting for Trump, that still it was somewhere 80 to 85% of so-called African American men voted for Kamala Harris. All right. The numbers in regards to what happened may have been slightly decreased. And that is just in terms of the electorate generally. But one of the problems, of course, that we have is just the question in regards to, you've got to run a progressive campaign that actually goes and does some outreach into the communities that you need to actually go ahead and attract. I don't think that even if, in fact, that the so-called African American population had voted in much larger numbers, Kamala Harris would have won the popular vote. But the problem is there's something called the Electoral College. And the Electoral College, I believe, despite the fact that there would have been an increased or enhanced so-called African American vote, that still Kamala Harris would have lost. She would have lost the Electoral College. Now we have to remember that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. When George Bush, actually ran, he lost the popular vote. So the question, or one of the questions in regards to the mechanisms of government in the United States, is the Electoral College. And the Electoral College, just like we have to say the United States Congress, was structured in a way so that the elites of this particular country would be able to go ahead and benefit from the fact that these structures existed. And we are in this particular point at that time. It's not a matter of a popular vote. It's a matter in terms of presidential races, the electoral college. And that's one of the reasons why we had the January 6th insurrection. There was an attempt to stop the certification of the election by the electoral college.
Yes. You are right, and I'm going to acknowledge that as a fact. But I read Project 2025. No sane person could vote for Project 2025. You laugh, but your country folk, your fellow citizens voted for Project 2025.
Yeah, look, this is a serious issue. First of all, the majority of white women voted for Donald Trump. Okay,
it's
as we said,
isn't it? Yes.
Who is, as we said, a philanderer, somebody who's also, as I said, civilly held responsible for rape, someone who is against abortion rights and other rights. And the majority of white women voted for him. Okay, so there's a problem. There's a serious disconnect. White men, I think one of the issues here is that white people in the United States, people of European ancestry, they want to identify with what they see as power and wherever that particular power emanates from. They see Donald Trump as having some of that particular power. And at this particular point, still, despite all of the damage that he's doing, not only to the nation, but to the world, that they are still supporting him. And I think that this is, of course, very, very problematic. I mean, Donald Trump, as an example,
forgive me,
it's difficult to explain other than saying this identification with power. Now, Donald Trump says that climate change is a hoax. All right. We know as human beings living on the earth that climate change is real.
Yes.
But members of his party will not sit him down and tell him that climate change is real.
It's real.
There's an attempt now to literally deregulate all aspects of the United States government, which, and this is very interesting, if in fact the government does not regulate anything, what is the purpose of a government?
Right. Indeed.
All right. And if in fact the government has no purpose, we're going back to what we can only say, and please understand that Europeans have a long history of feudalism.
Yes.
We're essentially, in terms of what Trump and the Republican Party is talking about, going back to a feudal society.
Indeed. Yeah. Yes, I can't argue with that. That apparently is the trajectory and will be the inevitable outcome of many of these policies. Most certainly, Project 25, that's most certainly true. The virtual abolition of the education department, federal education department, is a further example of that. And indeed, you reference Roe v. Wade, and that it is mind-boggling that Americans would accept this change, which ultimately will work against their medium and long-term interest. It does seem mind-boggling to us outsiders, I'll just move you on, if I may now, on to more recent events, the most recent events. Is it true that, it's okay, is it true that he really wanted to buy Greenland? Is that really true? Or was that just as a publicity stunt on his part?
Well, first of all, I think we all have to recognize that Donald Trump is not a very learned man. I don't
That's an
really,
understatement.
I really do not know if, in fact, Donald Trump really knew where Greenland was until someone showed it to him on a map. Now, part of the problem, based upon the mental issues that Donald Trump has, is that he is afflicted with extreme narcissism.
Yes.
This is why, as an example, he wants to put his name on everything that he can.
Yes.
This is nothing new, because remember, his name, whether it was Trump Plaza or Trump Steaks, whether it was Trump Real Estate or Trump this or Trump that, he's always had this issue in terms of wanting to put his name on as many things as he can. Trump University, all right, which was one
Another
of the
failure. Another failure. Yes.
Right. That not only went bankrupt, but also actually cheated people out of thousands and thousands of dollars. All right.
Yes.
Trump is a grifter. He is also one who actually would like to be accepted by old money in the United States. But the old money interests, they don't necessarily like Donald Trump. So his next move is to go ahead and get with the new money. The new money is essentially the technology crew, whether it's the Elon Musk or the Bill Gates or the people, the Jeff Bezos, those who are now billionaires based upon issues of technology. One of the points about that is back in the really starting even before the Depression in the United States. So we're talking about the middle to late 1920s into the 1930s. There was a class of people that was called the robber barons.
Yes.
The robber barons were people who went ahead and got rich and did whatever they wanted to do. And the government at a particular point determined that they needed to go ahead and put the robber barons under some kind of control. We then had a series of legislative and presidential moves in terms of creating, for instance, antitrust laws. These laws were specifically enacted to control this particular class, which had led to the Depression in the first place. All right. So you had people with large amounts of money exploiting everybody else. And this, of course, has to do with the capitalist system. Because by definition, the capitalist system is there to exploit people. So, years ago, back in, I guess, the 1960s, there were people who talked about Black capitalism in the United States. We want to be Black capitalists. But you can't be a capitalist when your ancestors were literally the capital that the United States was built on in the first place. It's just a contradiction, which would make it very difficult for you to be in the same room with those people who had used your ancestors, as I said, for capital to go ahead and create the wealth which the United States, and not only, of course, the United States, we have to talk about Great Britain. We have to talk about all of those nations that actually benefited from the transatlantic slave trade, because it was a very lucrative business in so many different kinds of ways. But back to Trump and Greenland. This desire to put his name on everything and the name of America on anything, talking about the Gulf of Mexico is now the Gulf of America. It's just insanity. It's just insanity. The other thing is that quite obviously Trump is interested in taking the post-World War II alliances that were created and destroying them.
Yes.
What is literally the purpose of that? Now, many of us have issues in regards to the alliances, whether it's NATO. NATO was very, very instrumental in the overthrow of Libya. This is something that has, for now, a number of years, it has haunted Africa because the Islamicists and the weaponry that was unleashed from that has led to Boko Haram in Nigeria.
Yes.
It's led
Very
to
true.
issues in terms of Mali. It's led to
That's right.
issues in Niger. It's led to
Yes.
issues around the African continent. We can talk about
Yes.
Somalia and those particular issues as well. So NATO did that. NATO was very clearly partially responsible for the overthrow of Libya. So
Are you forgive me for interrupting, are you therefore supporting its current position, which does appear to be so, to effectively chip by chip dismantle NATO, the North Atlantic Alliance?
on a very pragmatic level, I don't know what kinds of sense that it makes. Okay.
Okay.
Russia at this particular point is in a bit of a tiff. They've got serious problems. They invaded Ukraine when there was possibly a diplomatic route to go ahead and take and resolve some of those particular issues. They've been in this particular battle, as you know, for some years. It has cost them in terms of lives, in terms of the Russian economy, in terms of any kind of credibility that they had in the world. So it's a problem. Russia at this particular point is,
Are they
I
a
guess,
threat? Are they a threat to America? Is Russia a threat to America?
based on the relationship that Donald Trump has with Vladimir Putin, they seem to be almost
Like
as thick
buddies,
as
yes.
thieves.
All right, I'm going to move off that then. I'm going to move off that because it's that's another interesting line of discussion. But I want to just bring us back to, and I am approaching the Supreme Court decision. Okay. But before I get there, I just want to mark another event that occurred in 2025, and that's of course the passing of the enormous tax cuts, which cost the American economy trillions upon trillions of dollars, of which 85 to 90% goes to less than 1% of the population.
Yes.
Trillions upon trillions, and there's effectively a transfer of costs from the poorest and middle income Americans to, of course, the high. How's that happened, sir? Your country folks seem to be very weird. I don't understand how such a strategy could get through Congress, the House, and in turn Congress. It just makes no sense. Well,
I agree.
Or is it that
I agree.
or is it that there is some alignment with his ideas that the rich should be allowed to become incredibly richer by paying less tax, and the poor and middle income should pay more tax? Maybe there's some alignment, as you've aligned with him on Russia. Maybe there's a general alignment across the House and Congress in respect of taxation on the rich, reduce it so that the poor can pay more.
Well, I wouldn't say I've aligned with him in Russia. I think that Russia at this particular point
I'm only
is an
teasing, of
imperious.
course.
I know. It's an imperialist. There are people who claim to be progressive or radical who have
Right.
this vision of Russia that goes back to the Russian Revolution, when they were communists, when there was a communist party. At this particular point in Russia, Vladimir Putin is not even a member of the Communist Party. The Communist Party has no standing at this particular point in Russia. Previously, as in China, if Xi Jinping was seen to be doing something wrong, the Communist Party would sit him down and remove him. Communist Party is in charge. In Russia, Vladimir Putin is in charge. And there's obviously a great, great difference. And I think that is problematic. And I think that those people who see themselves as progressive or Marxist-Leninists, they need to be careful in regards to their perception, because Russia of 2026 is not the Russia of 1916. It's not.
Now tell us about this tax granting to the rich, giving them so much money, which adds what, 3 $1.4 trillion to the national debt over a period
Look,
of 10 years.
on a very practical level, I'm retired. I have a pension. I have Social Security, and my taxes went up. Okay. Now, I know if my taxes went up, that other people, who are probably, I'm not complaining. I do relatively well for a retiree. I don't have to depend on food banks to feed me or anything.
Right.
I've been fortunate in that particular way. But
Mhm.
I very clearly understand, and this is something that we've known for some years, because even before the Trump tax cuts, there are major corporations in the United States, Shell Oil, Mobil Oil, Exxon, who pay little or no taxes every year. And this is not new. This was under
That's true.
Biden. This was under Obama. This was under everybody. That's
And we
the
see
way.
billions in subsidies from the government, tens of
Yes,
billions from the government.
yes, yes,
Sorry, go ahead.
yes, yes, and pay no taxes. So I would teach classes, and I would tell people, I said, listen, as an individual, I pay more tax than Mobil Oil. And they were like, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
Yeah.
How can that be? And then they would look it up, and they would see that literally I was telling the truth.
Yes.
All right. But it's difficult. And part of it has to do with just pure ignorance. We have to say that the American populace is ignorant. Are they as ignorant as their leader, Donald Trump? That's difficult to say. But there are segments that are at least as ignorant, if not more ignorant. There are aspects of American history, as an example. The labor movement. The Trump administration is very clearly against the labor movement. It is the labor movement that made the American middle class what it used to be. Without an active labor movement and the sacrifices of the labor movement, because people have to understand that people died to go ahead and have a 5-day working week, to have a 40-hour rather work week, to not have children laboring in factories, to have a livable wage. These are all the result of a labor movement. But now in the United States, you have people arguing that, for instance, unions should be abolished.
Yes, I've seen it.
It's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling.
It's mind-boggling, and it literally contradicts all that people with some kind of knowledge know and should actually be concerned about. But here it is in 2026. We have people who articulate this on a regular basis. Teachers' unions are no good.
Can I just take you further in that case? And in parallel with unions, of course, the loss of American manufacturing, which is, of course, the basis upon the actions this 47th president is taking. Now, I've not quite understood why Americans blame China, when, of course, American corporations, the rich, the elites, made a conscious decision that they will not make enough money in America, and it was cheaper to manufacture in China.
Look, one of the things that many of us have experienced, we will call tech support for a let's say our computer, whatever our computer is, whatever the company is, and you talk to someone, and that someone is in the Philippines, or in Ireland, or in India. They're not from the United States. All right? Not at all. And this represents two things. It represents, first of all, the idea that corporations want to go ahead and make as much money as they can. They want to exploit labor in other places, but at the same time, they do not want to support American workers, because there would be American workers that can do that work.
Yes.
And they need to be trained, and they need to be paid to do that. To send it somewhere else is ridiculous. The other thing is, of course, now Donald Trump is saying he wants to bring back manufacturing to the United States, but it's too late. It's gone. I remember I purchased a television many years ago. It was probably one of the last companies that made televisions in the United States. There are now no televisions made in the United States. They're all made in Taiwan, in China, in Singapore, in places other than the United States. There may be United States companies that sell them, but they're not being manufactured here. One of the ridiculous things that Trump has done recently is the idea of, well, one, fossil fuels, and again, getting back to the whole question of the environment, but to go ahead and, for instance, the regulations that were governing emissions from automobiles, they want to go ahead and relax all of those regulations, do away with the regulations, pollute as much as you want to, go ahead and have cars that guzzle gasoline or whatever. And it makes absolutely no sense that there are, I'll give you an example, American company, Ford Manufacturing Company, they were building plants in the United States to make batteries for cars.
Yes.
Now, with these new regulations being relaxed, with the relaxive regulations, what Trump is doing is he's essentially killing the American automobile industry and going ahead and creating a situation in which, once again, damage to the climate, damage to American people, in terms of from these emissions, which we know are toxic. They cause asthma, they cause respiratory illnesses.
Yes.
It's making the people of the United States less safe, more ill, more sick. It makes no sense.
Sir, I'm obliged, if I may call you Basir, sorry. I'm obliged to
What?
answer this question. Look, I recall on, what do you call it? What did he call it that day in which he announced the tariffs, the Jubilee Day, whatever he called it?
Liberation Day.
A Liberation Day. There you are. Gosh.
Oh, the Liberation Day.
There you are. In which he announced that he was imposing these tariffs to protect American industry, therefore to protect American workers. And I recall thinking, this is an odd way to protect them. But I noted that there wasn't much pushback from Americans generally. There was an announcement of the tariffs, but generally I wasn't detecting a pushback. Am I right
Well,
with that observation, or is it I just didn't?
we've got to
not
say a
study
couple
enough?
of things. First
Okay.
of all, the corporate media in the United States is complicit in everything that's happening.
It is true.
It's a disaster. I have to look in terms of broadcast news. I'll look at BBC, and I'll get a better sense of what's happening in the world from BBC than I can from any corporate media in the United States. So what happens is that there is a distorted picture of what is actually taking place in the United States and what the United States people feel based upon the fact that it's being filtered through the corporate media. That if in fact we want to see what's really happening, we have to go to independent media in the United States, or we have to go to media outside of the United States.
Okay. If I may ask you at this point, I'm going to ask you as a American citizen, did you believe that China was going to pay the tariff?
I believe that I was going to pay the tariffs. That I know very clearly that any corporation that was going to go ahead and be faced with higher prices for imported goods, that they were going to directly pass those particular charges on to me directly.
And
It
just to
was
be
very
clear,
clear.
hold on. I want to just tell you this, because I've got family over there, you see, and there was some confusion among my family members who are typically quite intelligent people. But nevertheless, he said, no, China will pay the tariffs. Okay. And there are certain news presenters and variety presenters who question this, but actually, generally, Americans were believing what was said, and they seem to be believing on the premise that it's possible for the federal government to impose a tax on a foreign nation. Okay, and therefore, that foreign nation would have to pay the tax if they wish to export to America. Okay, without even a second thought that, in fact, what is actually happening, you have American importers who import from a foreign nation, and based upon the country of origin on which the basis of the tax is being paid here in the United States of America, not in Beijing. And therefore, it can only be a local tax upon local businesses, in turn, local consumers. Now, it seemed blindingly obvious to most of us outside of America, but I've gone through my records again for the first month or so. I saw very little pushback from Americans. I don't know. I've not had the opportunity, he says, to review your radio program. But on your channel, were you pushing back within the first few hours that this is wrong? It's actually a local tax on local consumption. Tell us.
I mean, as I said, it's very clear that any corporation that's going to be faced with higher prices for importing goods, importing parts that they need for assembly. I mean, as an example, one of the things we're seeing in the automobile industry is that even cars that are assembled in America, that are assembled from a variety of parts made all over the world, that the prices are increasing. And that the increase in price is not just something that's paid by the importing government, it's something that's paid directly by the person purchasing that particular automobile. It's being paid by the consumers. And it's very, very clear. Now, to the Supreme Court ruling, and this is very interesting.
Oh, can I, before we get to this, we're almost at the, I'm almost there. I just want to take people there step by step. So, recognition, that's recognition that tariffs can only be paid by U.S. corporations in the U.S. importing from overseas. Okay, and therefore a tariff of say 30% of the Chinese card, let's say, or in fact it went up to 100% at one point. Anyway, okay, will mean that the card therefore become more expensive because the importer has to pay the tax. It cannot be levied on the Chinese supplier because it's outside of US jurisdiction. Therefore, it's illogical to say the exporter in China will pay the tax because the American government doesn't have authority to impose a tax on a exporter in China or the US, or forgive me, or Canada or Mexico. Therefore, it can only be paid by the US importer, and therefore that tax would inevitably be passed on to the end user, the consumer, the American citizens. That's easily understood. I was struck by the numbers of Americans, even on the so-called progressive side at first, who were hesitant and had to process this as being, well, is he right? Actually, it was amazing to watch. For at least 14 days, I saw very little pushback. I could be wrong, but it was very little pushback. But I'm now, let's take us forward now to where we are today. He imposed tariffs on countries like the Caribbean countries who export so little to America, but import a great deal from America. Places like Jamaica can you imagine Jamaicans paying 20-25% tax on what little export they commit? How ridiculous! How ridiculous! I understand there are islands in the Pacific whose name eludes me right now, which are essentially animals and ducks and so on, imposing taxes on them. It seemed absolutely ridiculous. And what I didn't see at that point is pushback from the Americans. It slowly evolved over time once the realization that, in fact, this tax would lead to higher prices in the shops. Okay. So are you able to now just to take us through how the case that was a pivotal case that enabled the Supreme Court to consider that case and therefore the ability of a president to impose tariffs without recourse to Congress. Okay. Can you just take us through how that could have happened?
Well, I have to say, I have not followed that particular Supreme Court case from its inception. And the reason being is that in terms of this particular Supreme Court, I don't have much faith in what the Supreme Court will do. And there are many reasons why this is so. I'll give you a good example. Racial profiling is unconstitutional. Yes. All right. But the Supreme Court recently made a ruling that has to do with ICE and immigration enforcement that they can stop someone because of their race or their accent. Okay, this was ruling by the Supreme Court, despite the fact that this would be a violation of numerous amendments to the Constitution, the First, the Fourth, the Fifth, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, that they went ahead and said, well, they can stop based upon the assumption that this might be someone who is an immigrant, and then it can be sorted out later. All right, there was a major case in New York City, Floyd versus the United States, in which it was found very clearly that racial profiling is unconstitutional. All right, yet and still, this particular court said, well, it's unconstitutional, but it's okay for these ICE agents to literally stop anyone who they think might be based upon color, skin color, language of origin, accent, anything. And that was ridiculous. Yes, so
I agree.
We have to understand that this court, which has a majority of Republican appointees, appointees that have been appointed by judges who have been appointed by George Bush, Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan. I mean, it's quite a mess.
But are you saying, because if I may, though, you are right, it is an extreme right-wing Supreme Court. Okay, but yet the Supreme Court struck down the majority of the Trump's sweeping global tariff in a 6-3 decision. The case name is Learning Resource Incorporated versus Trump. The court ruled that the administration exceeded its legal authority by using International Emergency Economic Powers, or Act, which is the IEEPA of 1977, to unilaterally impose broad import taxes. I was pleased by that last word, import taxes. That's what it is. Therefore, the tax that America ultimately will pay. Now, that's a 6-3 decision. And despite the extreme right-wing leaning of the court, is that a sign of hope for the future? Because that's a pretty brutal decision, quite emphatic, if I may say so.
Well, several things come to mind. In terms of the 6-3 vote, I had to look at what justices voted which way. Yes. And the 3 justices that voted in favor of Trump were Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Brett Kavanaugh. Brett Kavanaugh is becoming more and more of a problem in that he wrote the decision that went ahead and made racial profiling admissible, legal, doable in the case of ICE and the immigration issues. All right. So there seems to be, to an extent, a kind of reimagining what the court is and who are the most, quote, conservative of the 9 Supreme Court justices. We know that there are 3 who are progressive. There are 3 who are kind of somewhat in the middle. And there now this new 3 in regards to being, the conservative minority. Now, we understand, and we were talking earlier today, and I said, when we're in elementary school here in the United States, we learn there are 3 co-equal branches of government, that there is an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. And that these 3 branches are not only co-equal, but they provide checks and balances. All right. That the checks are, if one portion, one segment of the government goes ahead and goes too far, then there are 2 other parts of the government that are supposed to put checks on that. And that in turn would create the kinds of balance. This is the idea in terms of that there are guide rails that exist that will go ahead and hold up. This still remains to be seen. First of all, one of the things we have to say is that while we talk about the United States being a democracy, we know, first of all, that it's a republic, not really a democracy, and that in terms of a democracy, it has never been, from its inception, from the Declaration of Independence, 1776, until now, it has not been a democracy. For years, as we know, that there were people of African ancestry in the United States who were denied the right to vote.
Indeed.
It's only been since 1964 that people who had been disenfranchised had the right, or the right was restored. Now we have people who are going ahead and in other ways restricting the right to vote. And in many instances, putting up the barriers that existed prior to the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, 1964 and 1965.
It is true.
So we have to be clear that this is not a democracy, that this has been hypocrisy. And we have to see how, this thing, Barack Obama used to talk about, how it's essentially, something we're making progress in a particular direction or whatever. But we see that progress has literally been stopped. There's several things that are.
Hold on, Bashir. If I may, the court has nevertheless overruled for more than 80% of the tariffs, at least, no? And whilst the ruling stopped the collection of those tariffs immediately, the court did not establish a specific process for returning the estimated 160 billion already collected. Now, that issue, for example, will be remanded to the lower courts, such as the U.S. Court of International Trade, for further litigation. Now, I say all that because, of course, yes, you're right. On specific issues, the court is extremely right-wing. On this issue, they appear to have tried to counter some of the extreme behavior of the president. And I'm wondering, should they be given a thumbs up for that or not?
Well, I have to say, as numerous people do, it's too soon to say. That there are going to be other cases that are going to come, especially in regards to this question of executive power and presidential overreach. There are a number of
Absolutely, yes.
cases that are going to come. For instance, the idea in terms of war powers. Can you kill civilians, unarmed civilians in the Caribbean, in the waters of the Caribbean, in the waters of the Atlantic, all right, with no proof, with no evidence, to call them enemy combatants? Can you do that? Is that legal? All right. And this will ultimately, since Congress, and again, the Republicans in Congress, as we say, they need to put on their big boy and big girl drawers, and they need to do their job.
Absolutely.
They're not doing their job. They're abdicating their responsibility to someone who's in the White House who is mentally ill. We're seeing elements of his illness all the time. Let's destroy the east wing of the White House and build a ballroom.
But I know, but he was still elected. And look, what he said in response to the ruling, he said that he called the decision a disgrace and confirmed he will seek to restore the tariff. Can you imagine? He will seek to restore the tariff using alternative authorities. And this might include, and something you might need to help me with, I have not had time to look at this, the El País ruling of some presidents of some kind, that some legal ruling, okay, which section 122 did you know that one? Which allows the president to impose tariffs of up to 15% for 150 days to address balance of payment deficit. Now that seems another one quite wild that you could have such powers, but clearly the number of countries that were caught up in this could clearly not justify section 122 being utilized. I'm still aghast that it could have happened in the first instance, and I'm listening to you carefully because you're quite right. These other parallel right-wing issues, which are clearly completely wrong, to be able to identify a person by their ethnicity and therefore intercede them purely based upon their ethnicity, what their color looked like, is abominable. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh! Can you imagine that as being a regulation, or forgive me, an interpretation of the law by the Supreme Court of all places? Gosh, it therefore means that the country is heading towards a major bump. Is it your theory that the American dollar, within a handful of years, will no longer be the reserve currency? And because of that anticipation that is going to happen, why this president has taken these draconian action to try to protect United States of America's economy?
Well, we're now in very clearly a global economy. We're no longer in an economy where a single nation can essentially live on its own in isolation. All right, those days are long, long over. And understanding that, we have to be clear that the demonization of China, it's not going to work. And one of the things that I am increasingly seeing a need for is an understanding of China and the Chinese people on levels that we haven't seen since the 1970s, at least, when normalization first occurred and Richard Nixon went to China. When Donald Trump talks about COVID as being the Kung flu, when he blames China on all different kinds of things, this is a method to demonize and dehumanize the Chinese people.
Indeed.
Now, Americans need to understand that there are at least, and I don't know the exact number now, 1.3 billion people in China, which makes that population 4 times the population of the United States.
Indeed, yes.
Now, do you want that particular number of people to be your enemy? do you want the number of that, that number of people to be your friends? Or at least to be in a situation where, there is détente, let us call it. All right?
Absolutely.
This idea, the United States has been doing war games in which a war between China and the United States has been the main issue of those games. And in all of the games that have been done via computer and AI and everything else, the United States always loses.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Can I ask you to say that
Understanding
again? I
that.
want you, forgive me, but Basia, I want you to say that again, and I say it slowly, because that is the part of my research which arrives at that fact that the United States would lose. But I just want you to say slowly and explain why they would lose.
The United States, for many years now, has seen China as its main threat. Now, we have to see how we define that threat. Is it an economic threat? Is it a physical threat? What is the nature of that threat? And I think that there's some unclarity in regards to that. Now, we see the United States responding to the economic threat, which is one of the reasons why these so-called tariffs have been imposed. And I think that this is, in many instances, saber rattling and bluster.
Yes.
All right. Then there's the question in regards to the strategic threat. And as I said, China has 1.3 billion people, 4 times the population of the United States. Okay. I think Europeans need to understand that at this particular point, they are a global minority.
Indeed.
This is something that if you just go ahead and look in school textbooks, if you look at maps of the world, if you look at various things, it's not projected in this way. One of the reasons why we have this fierce immigration fight in the United States is that it's very clear that the majority of people in the United States are not going to be of European ancestry.
Indeed.
And there's nothing that they can do to stop that. All right? The birth rate of people of European ancestry in the United States is too low.
Yes.
People are talking about
Way below
sperm count
replacement.
is too
Yes.
low.
Yes.
You've got incels, this crazy guy, Nick Fuentes. He's 27 years old. He says he never had sex. They can't procreate. If you don't have sex, you can't procreate, right? So it's over. And unless you're going to talk about the imposition of serious draconian rules where only people who are not melanated are allowed to live in the United States, it's over. It's a done deal.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, I think it's important on the diplomatic front, for the United States to, instead of making enemies, begin to make friends.
Absolutely.
As I said, in war games. And these war games started quite a while ago. Every war game that the United States has gone ahead in terms of a conflict between the United States and China has ended with China winning a particular war. So in terms of a war, the United States against China, the likelihood that the United States would prevail is low. You can saber rattle, you can bluster, you can go ahead and put a crazy man in charge of the Department of Defense, which is now calling the Department of War, which I call the Department of War Crimes.
Indeed.
It's the Department of War Crimes. All right? But the problem is, and this is up to the international community, the international community has to begin to hold people who violate international law, countries that violate international law, accountable.
Agreed.
All right? With
But the
no
Americans are
account.
excluded, though. Forgive me, but America is excluded. You can't actually take an American to the International Court of Human Rights because they're not signatories to it. So
But
that's
they've
just
signed the Geneva Conventions, as an example.
this is true.
All
This
right.
is true.
So while the ICC and the ICJ may not apply in regards to the United States, the Geneva Convention does apply.
It does. Yes, it does.
So
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, the international community, I believe, when we fall down, when the international community falls down, and let me just look at three things. Let's look at Palestine.
Yeah.
Let's look at Venezuela. And let's look at what's currently happening in terms of Cuba. All right. The United States is trying to strangle Cuba.
Yes.
What is
Why?
the international community? For me, the reason that the United States has, for now, since 1959, 1960, has imposed an embargo on Cuba is that Cuba is an embarrassment to the United States. We have a poor country of mainly people of African ancestry. And a lot of people don't know that because when we see somebody like Marco Rubio, we think that Marco Rubio represents the majority of people in Cuba. That's not true. All right? Cuba, with a medical system that goes ahead and keeps people well,
yes,
and not sick.
That's right.
Where the maternal mortality rate is lower than the United States.
Yes, yes.
When you have an education system where 98% of the people in Cuba are literate.
That's right. Oh.
When you have this done in a poor country that says they want to be communist, it's an embarrassment. And since it's only 90 miles away from the United States, it's an embarrassment that is embarrassingly close to the United States.
Yes, indeed. The Bay of Pigs, huh?
So
and
Cuba
it is
is
true.
being strangled right now. I'm in touch with people on the island. I have people on the island who I consider my family. And there's an attempt to strangle. They're struggling. And the Cuban people are very clear. They say, Viva la revolution. They are revolutionaries and they will go down as revolutionaries. They're not interested in Cuban, the Gusano community, as we call it, or whatever, in Florida, to come and attempt to try to rule them. They're not interested in being like Puerto Rico. We saw Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl. And part of what he was very, very clearly saying is that there is a world, there is the Americas, that America is not the United States, that America is all the countries in the hemisphere.
Absolutely.
And that's part of what that message is. And when Bad Bunny showed how it's taken a long time for electricity to go ahead and be restored after hurricanes and other natural disasters in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is at this particular point a commonwealth controlled by the United States. Absolutely. It has no...
We're pausing there. As you can see, it was an in-depth interview in which we were able to look at every facet of American society through the lens of these tariffs and understand its impact. Checks and balances. There we go. Checks and balances. Are there checks and balances in the United States? But at least at some level, clearly there are. But this interview goes on to look really quite thoroughly at the issue. And I want to thank Bashir for his input, his responses to questions, his erudite way of sharing the facts with us. It was truly an inspirational experience, truly inspiring experience. And the rest of the interview will be available shortly in one of our podcasts in sort of 25-minute slots, so it's easy to digest it. But once issued, please share the links with your friends and families. And look, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, it really does help us out. It tells the YouTube algorithm that the content we provide is worthwhile sharing with the billion or so free subscribers to YouTube. It doesn't cost you a penny. It is truly inspirational. You are the change makers. Remember, the whole purpose of the Motivator Show is, of course, to inform and to inspire, to motivate you to action, to improve your lives, your family lives, and indeed your wider community's life. And together we can and we will transform the world. Thank you for your support. It's really been very, very warm-heartening, I must say. There are just two issues we want to tackle before we go for today's show, and it has been slightly longer than usual, we admit. We want to ensure that each of you who wish to make suggestions to subjects or persons that we should interview, okay, we don't mind your recommendation, okay? We welcome your recommendation. So what I'm going to do is put onto the screen a details of our email address, and we welcome your contact us. There we go. I've got it now. It's obviously the Motivator Show 501 at gmail.com. The Motivator Show 501 at gmail.com. Okay. We welcome your input. If you wish to communicate with us, this is the method to communicate with us. We'll welcome all communications. And don't forget, before leaving, either to give us a thumbs, acknowledgement, or leave a comment. We'll be most grateful for that as well. It will just enable us to move forward. You can always rely upon us here at the Motivator Show to provide good quality dialogue that is intended to stimulate and encourage reaction from yourselves. So together we continue to transform the world. If in doubt, ask questions. So, until the next time, we want to say to you, you are the change makers. Your future is in your hand. It's your oyster, as it were. Yeah? It is you that have to make that decision, a conscious decision for continued development, continued improvement. But if you're feeling that, as if you need support, reach out for support. Don't be proud. Reach out for support. And I believe you'll be surprised how much support is available to you. Okay? You'll be surprised. If in doubt, ask questions. Okay? Now, we're going to leave today, but please pass on links to these podcasts to your family, friends, and wider networks. And remember, we remain faithful to you. So, until the next time, we remain the Motivator Show.
Trump's tariffs are illegal.
Africa's great.
Justice,
Africa's great.
Katanji,
Africa's
Brown
great.
Jackson
Africa's great.
led the charge
Africa's
to
great.
strike down
Africa's
Trump's
great.
illegal
Africa's great.
tariffs.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Chief Justice
Africa's great.
John
Africa's
Roberts.
great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's
Justice
great.
Amy
great.
Corey Barrett.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's great.
John
Africa's
Gorsuch.
great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Sonia
great.
Sotomayor.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Justice
Africa's
Elena
great.
Kagan.
Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great. Africa's great.
Trump is defeated. Is defeated. Is defeated.